Welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today, let's talk about more mortal sins of running your own meetings and events. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I guess more completely honest up front. This is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about. It is my guilty pleasure, if you will. This topic absolutely suits my analytical mind, especially as I go through all these different seminars and conferences and workshops and boot camps, and I see how different organizations run their events and different meetings. And, certainly coming out of the Air Force world where meetings have their own feel to them just based on the dynamics of being in the military and everything that goes into that. And then coming out of that into a more professional business world, more traditional, if you will. And then even going to large conferences and huge gatherings where there are these big events and how those events are run. And it's always so fascinating to me I'm by nature, I think I've shared this with you before. I am an observer by nature. I just enjoy watching other people in the form of what are their habits? Why are they doing that? What made them do that? Going to the airport is one of my favorite things to do. Well, I guess not to do, but when I'm at the airport, seeing all the different types of people and, every type and shape and color and everything of people go through an airport. And to me, it's just fascinating that we live in such a dynamic and diverse kind of environment. And meetings are no different. No two meetings are the same, hopefully, for you. I mean, hopefully, if you guys have a normal staff meeting, it may be similar in structure and flow, but hopefully it's not the same every time of, you're just doing some rote memorization or repeating of information week after week after week. Because I've been in those type of meetings where it feels like Groundhog's Day, the classic Bill Murray movie where every day is the same. You wake up and nothing changes, and here you are again, just wasting your life with these meetings. But if you were not aware, if you're just coming to this podcast and you have not had a chance to listen to every single one, I have done 2 previous episodes on this particular topic about the mortal sins of running your own meetings. Should you be the one in charge of the flow and organization of the meeting, seminar, workshop, boot camp, if you're an event coordinator for your company and you're putting on these big events, please, please, please do us all a favor that may be attending your event or your meeting. Go back and listen to, I believe the first one was episode 145. And then I did a sequel follow-up to it in episode 163 and listen to those tips that I offer. Certainly subject to interpretation. These are just things that as somebody that has been in attendance in all kinds of meetings and seminars, workshops, and conferences, it would appreciate if some of these tips were taken to heart. And this is no different. So Liz and I were recently in a kind of a marriage seminar workshop type thing to learn about communication and feelings. I don't really know. I wasn't paying that much attention. Haha, joke. It's a joke, everybody. But it was a meeting, right? It had your presenters and it had, people that were in charge of the flow, and it had structure to it and, and tasks and all those types of things. So I naturally found myself not necessarily critiquing, but certainly paying attention to how this particular organization ran their meetings, their seminars, because it was an environment that I'd not been exposed to before this one organization. And the first thing that kind of jumped out, and they even kind of allowed for it because, it was a marriage conference and there was some heavy topics that were talked about, so they even did a disclaimer in the beginning of, hey, because of some of the, emotions that are tied to some of these talks that the presenters are going to have, we will be reading from this script, and which totally makes sense, because anytime you're dealing with something that's very high emotion, you tend to lose intelligence. You lose the ability to, be clear and concise and have a straight train of thought throughout it because it is so emotionally involved. And so I have, zero fault with that whatsoever. But as they were going, instead of having like those particular events that they wanted to share, from their life, being like from, they read from a script that they had previously written out in order to, convey all the right details and points that they wanted to do with the story. The entire thing was scripted. And it was just this weird, it became tedious and distracting in the form of, because there were two couples, so 4 presenters, and they would just alternate reading their section of a script, just like, if you were in a high school play where you had lines, and, they'd finish their little paragraph, and then they would look at, couple number 2, husband number 2, and then he would read his, and then he would look at, his wife, and then she would read her little section, and it became so distracting because it was so rote. It was so not unimaginative, because, they had a point and they had a flow to it, but it just felt so predetermined that it didn't come across as genuine, even though their stories were absolutely genuine. It was from their life. It was, an experience that they had, and they were sharing with us to help us learn and avoid those types of mistakes. It just came across because the entire thing was like that, instead of, maybe even bullet points, right? We're in the military, we're taught, if you're doing a presentation, you don't write out the entire paragraph up there. You put your couple points that are your memory joggers, and you talk about those points. Same thing as what I'm doing with my podcast. I write a couple kind of bullet points of the things I want to talk about, and then the rest of it is me just filling you in of my opinions and stories, or whatever that is, and maybe that's just me and being a little more ad hoc in the process versus, something like that. But the point being, if you're running a meeting or something like that, there's a time for like legitimate scripts where you need to read, verbatim from, especially if you're in like a legal meeting or seminar or a financial advising type of thing, where there are, SEC regulations and stuff like that. But there are also times where, in order to convey that connection, you need to deviate from that script, and it cannot appear that you're just reading a script. Which kind of leads me to the next part, because the two couples, the 4 people that were presenting, they're different personalities, different couples. They had been friends a long time, these 2 particular couples, but they're different lifestyle, different jobs, different histories, and all that kind of stuff. But because they were each literally just reading from the script, so much connection was lost. So much personality was not conveyed. It was at one point when one of the gals was reading, I'm like, I feel like I'm being read a nighttime story. She was using a voice that I could imagine her using for, an 8-year-old son or daughter before bed. And it was just but it was displaced for our setting. Like, this is weird, but it was kind of her reading voice. And it just lacked this personality to match the setting, if that makes sense. And because of that, it lacked a connection. Like, I can sympathize with their situation and what they went through, and appreciate that they were, reliving these hard moments in their life and their history in order to help us and teach us from their mistakes. But it was hard to empathize, because it just felt, like anything else, if you were just reading from a book, but it's hard to empathize with the reader of the book, if that makes sense. So that would be my thing of, if you are doing presentations, you have to inject some sort of personality into your presentation, into your speech, into your talk. I mean, if you go to any sort of instructor that talks about speech, whether it be at your high school or local community college, or somebody that you pay thousands upon thousands of dollars to help you through that process professionally, they will tell you need to use your personality and emotion and different tonality and all this types of stuff in order to make your presentation engaging and interesting and create connection with your audience. And this was lacking in that. So, connection. I believe I mentioned these in the previous probably 2, but again, this conference was kind of no different. You have to allow time for biology. You get my meaning? You have to allow time in your schedule. I get it. You got a lot of information to get through. Your time is limited, and you want to be respectful of people's time. But man, we still need to use the bathroom. It happens. Like, that's us. There are very few people that can go 8, 9, 10 hours without ever using the restroom, especially when you're offering coffee in the morning and breakfast and lunch and dinner and things like that. And you have to allow for that time. So again, a reminder, you need to do something, somehow allow for that fluff to give people the opportunity to use the restroom if they need to or when they need to. All right. This was an interesting facet, and it kind of came up later. So for this particular conference, we checked in. It was at a hotel, and we checked in and went to the little side check-in, right, where you register or you confirm your registration and get your little room key and pack and stuff. And they were just like, yeah, breakfast is, in the morning, blah, 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 at the hotel. Like, okay, cool. But they didn't tell us, like what time breakfast was or where it was at or anything like that. You were just kind of left to figure it out. Well, in this particular instance, lo and behold, because this hotel we were at had multiple it wasn't a full blown like Las Vegas style, event center, but there were multiple conference rooms and things and several events going on. And it just happened to be where our kind of workroom or conference room was next door to another event. I think it was actually like a bunch of massage therapists going through class, or I don't know, whatever massage therapists have to do. But they had their own food, and it just happened to be set out, and it was more like a light buffet that they had ordered. Well, nobody told our group that wasn't our breakfast. It was literally right in front of our room, and it just happened to be kind of a shared hallway with this other group. And our people were stealing their Cokes and their sandwiches and all this stuff. And then it wasn't until like almost our lunchtime where somebody said like, hey, that's not our stuff. You're essentially stealing from these massage people that had paid for that. They had paid the hotel to provide these snacks and foods for their students. So, and it dawned on me, I'm like, maybe you should have told everyone like, hey, breakfast is at the hotel lobby, from whatever, this time to this time. And so it was just, it was kind of comical in the sense of half of this marriage conference class went to breakfast at the hotel dining room, and the other half went down to the conference center area, the event center area, and had it from these massage people. And of course, nobody kind of said anything, but it was a lack of communication in the check-in process that clearly identified the instructions of helping people out. Because you had people, from out of town, and as with any type of event, you get people that maybe don't travel that much. They don't know. They're not that experienced with hotels and how all that process works. And when you remove the hotel staff from it, so you're not checking in with the hotel clerk, that is their job to ensure, hey, our guests, these are our amenities, these are the pool hours, and these are quiet hours, and all that kind of stuff. Then it is your responsibility as the event coordinator and greeter to ensure all those things are taken care of. All right. And this falls in line with another one of my points was like clear instructions, right? This is times, when are we starting? When are we finishing? So, people, these are all adults here. We kind of need to know our schedule a little bit. Maybe we've got other things happening that we have to work around. Places, certainly, where events are going to be happening, especially if your event, you're going to be moving different, venues. Like, hey, if you're going to go see this speaker, he's in Hall B, room 307, or this speaker's in Hall C, room 206, whatever that is. Be clear in your times and places and activities, okay? And it doesn't hurt to provide a schedule, and it doesn't have to be like totally exact, or anything, but if you're doing a weekend event, let people know, like, yeah, we're starting, on Friday and Saturday, we start at 8 a.m., but on Sunday, we're going to start at 9 because it's, it's Sunday, or, whatever that is, whatever that schedule is. And these are our anticipated times that we're finishing up. And it helps people feel more comfortable during your event, because they're not sitting there constantly going, does this go for like 2 more hours? Am I going to be here for another 7 hours? Like, are we here until 8 at night? Like, we don't know, because no one has bothered to tell them. And it's a simple thing like, hey, everybody, we're getting started tomorrow morning at 8:30. Breakfast starts at 6:30. So for you early risers, but please make sure you give yourself time to get breakfast if you want to, but be in your seats by, 8:30, and we can get started on time. We anticipate this day going until, 4:30, and that will include lunch and blah, 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 blah. So that way people can anticipate and know, and they can just prepare mentally and emotionally and physically for that. So clear instructions, times, places, activities. This was an interesting thing that had never happened before. This next item was, so again, marriage conference, their communication, or work on feelings. Like, again, I don't remember because I wasn't paying attention. But one of the requests of the presenters were like, hey, use this weekend to really, focus on your marriage, focus on your spouse, focus on what's important right here, right now. We've specifically removed you from your normal environment, i.e. your home, your work, your job, your kids, and placed you in this little bit more sheltered environment in order to create that focus and connection. So as part of that, they requested, please do your absolute best to minimize, like, hey, take a little break from social media. Don't turn on your TV when you get back to your room if that's your kind of normal thing, use it as a chance to talk to each other, all those types of stuff. So it was very interesting. They're like, and to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I see that. I can get on board. That's fitting with the intent of this weekend of this marriage seminar. And but the funny thing was, they used text messages to communicate with us because this was one we were kind of constantly doing assignments of like, hey, the husband's going to go over here and write about this, and the wife's going to go over here, and we'll text you when it's time to come back or when it's time to go to lunch or to meet at these different places and do these different things. And I thought it was so, and I don't know how to fix it necessarily. It was just such an interesting disconnect. On one, don't be on your phone. They literally told us like, hey, turn your phone, well, they didn't say turn your phone off, but they're like, yeah, put your phone down. Don't take it out of your pocket or leave it in your room. But then they literally, like 5 minutes later said, oh, we're going to be trying out this new system where we text you when it's time to, either come back to the conference room or where to meet to lunch and all those types of things. And I'm going, this doesn't make sense, because that's what people do that are already addicted to their phones and have no self-control with that. Is anytime that little bugger chimes, i.e. I got a text, boom, and they're already on there and like, oh, while I'm here, I better check my Facebook or I better check my email, all those types of things. Or I forgot I needed to shoot off this text to my business partner. There's so many distractions that are tied to your phone. So it was this interesting disconnect there. Again, I'm not sure exactly how you would get around that communication piece. But it was an interesting, I guess it falls along the lines of making sure your instructions and actual practices are congruent with each other, if that makes sense. So you can't really tell people, hey, don't ever be on your phones for the entire weekend, but then turn around and say, make sure you're watching out for our texts, to let you know when it's time to come back and rejoin the group. So that was interesting. All right. So I've got, just so you know, I've got 2 more. This is something, and it may be due to my nature of prove to me why I should be doing this instead of taking people, because I hate doing things for no reason. It is one of my things of, if I'm sitting there going, why am I doing this? I'm already to the point where I'm annoyed and I'm starting to check out or actually dig in and fight whatever that thing is. And this weekend was interesting. Name tags. Cool. So they had these little, lanyard things with Kale and Liz Houser on it, and I'm okay with that, right? That's a natural thing for any sort of conference. But then at the beginning, the first session, they proceeded to tell us like, hey, this is not a social, you're not here to make friends with all these other couples. We're literally here to work on your marriage, to teach you all these skills and do all these things with just you and your wife. So it was essentially, do not interact with these other people. And then I'm sitting there going, well, why did you give me a name tag to wear around? Like, the hotel doesn't care. Evidently, Joe and Bob sitting next to me, not Joe and Bob, but, Joe and Sally sitting next to me, they don't care who I am because I'm supposed to not talk to them. I'm supposed to only talk to my wife, Liz, and I don't need a name tag for her. And it became this thing where, of course, everyone wore their name tags because that's just, I guess, kind of what people do. But I never did. I literally never put it on. And not at any point during the entire weekend no one said anything, which, okay, whatever. But 2, I never ran into an encounter where it would have been nice or appropriate that somebody had and saw my name tag, because that just wasn't the type of conference it was. So it just created this thing in my mind, again, I don't think it bothered anyone else but me, of you've created this completely arbitrary requirement of name tags that serve no purpose. So it goes back to requiring things that just don't make sense or mean anything in the overall scheme of that. So this was certainly pretty unique to this situation, but look at other things that you may be requiring of people that maybe just don't make sense or they're not worth the effort. Okay, does that make sense? All right, so the last thing, super, super important. If you want to be taken seriously as a presenter, as a event coordinator, as an organization that is putting on that thing or that meeting, timeliness, okay? especially if at the beginning, your very first session, because most people show up on time to the very first session of whatever that is, or the meeting, right? You have a start time. This is starting at 8 o'clock. We're starting at 10:30 a.m., whatever that is, people show up initially. But if you've got something that's ongoing, or there's multiple start and stop times, and you make an effort and an intention to say, hey, everybody, again, going back to, we've got a tight schedule. We've got a lot of information to cover. We are going to start, each session when we tell you that is our start time. So please do every effort to get down here on time. And basically, if you're not, we're going to start without you, and you're going to miss this value of information that, oh, by the way, you paid for to be here and get, right? This isn't like just some big charity thing. Like, we actually paid to go and learn this information. So conceivably, it's important to us that we're there to learn it all. But when inevitably, and this has happened just so many times, as each session progresses and people, for whatever reason, don't show up on time, the presenters choose, instead of honoring that threat and commitment that they made to all of us in the beginning of, hey, we're going to start at 8:45, or we are going to start at 1:30 when we get back from lunch and start presenting with or without you. And then 8:45 comes along, I'm sitting in my seat because I got there on time. I value this information. And then you choose to wait another 5 minutes because 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 people just haven't come back from that, or they haven't gotten there yet in the morning. And it's as I was sitting there going through this process in real time, I'm sitting there going, why is this a big deal? This is a big deal for several reasons. One, it shows respect to the people that did choose to show up. It shows respect to those that value the information and value their time to respect your request to be there on time. Does that make sense? And when people don't show up and they're not choosing to do that, one of two things is happening. Either, well, I guess one of three things are happening. Either they don't value the information that you're giving, so they do not see the value in it and they don't respect it. Or, so I guess it is two things, or something has come up in their immediate need that overrides that value. They may find it valuable, but maybe, their teenage daughter called and is freaking out about something, and they need to take an extra 5 or 10 minutes to talk to her on the phone because whatever the case is, something has happened, or they're having a bathroom emergency, right? That happens. All kinds of things. But the point being, you can't sit there, especially when you've advertised this as a tight schedule, you got a lot of information, you can't sit there and cater to the least common denominator in the form of whoever shows up last is when we will get started. Because all that does is makes me not want to show up on time if you're not going to start for another 5 or 10 minutes late anyway. Does that make sense? And then it's just this perpetual nasty cycle of people just showing up later and later and later because you're not committing to the times that you've said. All right, so rote scripts, allowing time for biology, lack of communication instruction, i.e. where do you eat breakfast in the morning or whatever that is for your event, clear instructions, times, places, activities, where to go, when to be, don't be on your phones yet communicating by phone, so just that disconnect of request versus reality. Lack of personality in presentations. This goes back to kind of the rote scripts because that creates a lack of connection with your audience. And then requiring things that don't make sense. Name tags when you don't need name tags. And then finally, as I just got off my soapbox with, starting on time. If that is important to you, do that. When people walk in late and they have that embarrassment of walking through the front of the class and realizing that they're late, they're probably going to show up on time next time. And if not, oh wells, right? Don't disrespect the rest of your event or class or seminar attendees by catering to the least common denominator of people who show up late. And certainly that particular aspect could change based on the size and how you call people out on that or not. Once you get to a certain size, you just can't control it, and you just have to go by time no matter what, and who's walking in and out all the time. And we covered that a little bit last time in one of the others. So yeah, episode 145 was my first iteration of this, 163, the second iteration of this. I hope you found this helpful. Please, 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 please take this into account as you're looking into running your own meetings and events. Certainly not everything on here will apply to every meeting and every event, conference, seminar. There's different variations and levels to it. But look how you can make your event and meeting something that is beneficial, valuable, and people will actually kind of want to be there because they see it as valuable, beneficial, and worth their time going to instead of something that they have to. Cool? All right, everybody. I'd love to hear your feedback, thoughts. If you completely think I'm off my rocker or I'm just being a selfish jerk or too critical or anything of that nature, hey, let me know. I can take it. If I'm totally right on and every one of these hit the spot, please smash that like button and let me know that way and let your people know so they can learn as well. All right. Have a fantastic afternoon no matter where you are at in the world. Bye.